This is the fourth and final part of the listening pedagogy lecture. We will now continue with information on how to write a group plan for a differentiated listening lesson. Well, first of all, we've seen that you need to look at your learners, your target audience, first. By doing a mock listening test or a listening quiz, you can determine the current level of listening in your classroom. Based on that, you will be able to analyze the different listening needs and the amount of help your learners need in order to learn and develop listening skills. You can use a group plan, which you will now see on the screen, to describe your lesson. You have about 3 groups, maybe 2 groups, depending on the classroom. You have pupils who are either very instruction dependent. You will have pupils who are to some extent instruction sensitive, and you have pupils who are instruction independent. The dependent group require a lot of assistance and extended instruction. By helping them solve particular listening tasks and by asking them questions that raise their metacognitive and linguistic and background knowledge, you will help them by scaffolding their listening process. This means that you will first model how you solve particular listening tasks, what you do to plan, monitor, and listen and solve a particular listening question. This requires a lot of modeling first, but not too much, followed by guided practice, where you help the listeners by asking a lot of questions. What is the listening task you have to perform? Which keywords do you think are important and or to be expected in a text on this particular topic? How will you approach this listening task? Which strategies do you know that you can apply in this particular listening situation? You can ask learners to listen, and then you can hand out a transcript of the listening text to actually watch and read along while listening for a second or even a third time. After this practice, you can also help them reflect on the listening task, and following guided practice, they will be asked to do individual practice, where they are asked to write down any cognitive steps they took to guide them through the listening process. A similar support structure can be used for the instruction-sensitive pupils, but they are more likely to be able to direct their own listening, maybe even with the help of a listening approach that they can refer to when they don't know what to do while listening. While the instruction-insensitive group really knows what to do while listening, but may be extra challenged by doing listening texts on a slightly higher level. And they were able to self-check their answers by collecting a transcript of the listening situation afterwards and comparing their notes on the transcript to your notes. When having created a group plan, you can now start by designing a listening lesson plan that can be either for the whole class or differentiated for subgroups. Basically, all skills lesson plans have 3 phases: a pre-task phase, in which you explain the lesson goals and the lesson timing but also seating arrangement for differentiated groups. You explain the task instruction, and if you work in groups, also the instruction on the work form that you use, and you activate vocab and prior knowledge to help learners become aware of the knowledge they can use in the listening context. After the pre-task, you now continue on to the listening task, which is actually listening and sometimes also involves repeated listening. In the post-task phase, you can check the listening process by selecting one of the pupils in the classroom or in each subgroup and have them explain the cognitive, affective and strategic operations they took to complete the listening task. In this post-task phase, it's very important to reflect on the task approach and on the strategies used to direct their attention and to collect the meaning from the message. After that, you can do some additional explaining when you notice that students are missing vital information, and then you can do a follow-up activity such as a summary activity, which can be done orally or in written form. Basically, there is a three-step model that you can use to analyze the listening task. What is the question, or what is the listening goal? Which words are important, and which listening strategies do I have to use to get to the answer? You then analyze the task by listening to the text and come up with an answer and check to see if your answer is correct following the listening goal or the question. There are a number of activities you can do while listening. In the pre-listening stage, you mainly activate vocab knowledge and background knowledge using a word web or mind map by predicting, by writing down words that are known, information that you're curious about, and after listening by reflecting on the difference. While listening, you typically listen for details or listen for specific information using the who, what, when, where, why, and how questions by having pupils fill in a grid, by taking notes or by drawing, for instance, by following instructions in the listening text. Afterwards, you can refer to the text by getting pupils to summarize the text or by summarizing particular steps in a text. A lot more can be found in a handout which will be placed on deel.do with lots of listening activities that you can use to construct a listening text. Basically, to summarize, an in-class listening activity has three phases: a pre-task listening phase, in which you activate vocab and prior knowledge and do task orientation, which can be done individually to get all the brains working, then checked in pairs, and then followed by a whole class discussion. So typically you activate individual brains, check in pairs, and have a whole class discussion. Then you continue on to the listening phase, in which you listen, summarize, and take notes. This is done individually with a reflection to follow that up. Check in pairs, and then a whole class discussion. Repeated listening can be done following the tips that follow from the whole class discussion. And then a post-listening activity is conducted, in which you check the listening activity approach and the strategy use, do repeated listening using transcripts to check what the pupils missed in the first listening instance, and then follow up doing speaking, writing, or a reading activity. It is important to revise listening and document the development in a personal listening file. A number of examples may be found on DLWO, which include a differentiated listening lesson plan that I created, and also you can refer to page 119 and 191, chapter 9 of Van der Gift and Go, to see outlines of good listening lessons. The literature that we use to create this lecture is mentioned in the next couple of slides: Van der Gift and Go, Bach and Underwood, but also excellent resources by Rebecca Oxford on language learning strategies and by Rost on teaching and researching listening. The book Actief met Taal contains a lot of work forms, and the book by Mendelssohn also dives into the strategy-based approach for second language listening. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me on this email address. This concludes the lecture.